How do I deal with one-on-ones with a coworker who is constantly overstepping personal boundaries with me? She's my peer. We work in a small office, 5 people. Another coworker and I are friends outside of work, but this person on my team and I aren't. I'd like our relationship to be more professional. What can I do?
What I'd encourage you is to focus on being center conversational or conversational leaning formal. So let me explain what that means. When I think of work relationships, relationships could either be casual, conversational, or formal. And these are all just indicated by the boundaries they would keep with people and that they keep with us. So when I think of casual, what I believe that means is we treat people like our friends and family, which might sound awesome, but I am going to tell you, some people come from like super messy family dynamics and other people come from like chillingly like formal family dynamics. And other people come from these like super wonderful families. There's kind of like, you don't really know what you're getting into if you get too casual with coworkers. So if they come from families that are like just those wonderful families, they'll probably be stay in like a really appropriate space. But some people who come from like really messy families, like maybe families that like yell to express themselves, you're opening up a whole different kind of thing could be opened up. So treating our coworkers like our friends and our family is something I deeply encourage staying away from. Because at the end of the day, the people that we're most willing to take liberties with are our closest people and like our friends and our family. Most people will be like shitty to their friends and their family in a way that they wouldn't be to their coworkers. So if we're thinking about being casual with people, we should stay away from treating them like our friends and family. And hopefully that will encourage other people from staying away from that, being with us as well. We're going to go all the way over to formal. Formal is kind of like more like 1970s, 1980s style leadership. It's very hierarchical. It's very like top-down communication. Like I tell you, you listen. It has a lot to do with a lot of space in the relationship. You're really only talking to people because you have to update them or they're asking for an update or they need to give you orders. In this space, it's like not really, I don't believe formal communication style and formal boundaries are really effective in today's workplace. But there are some industries that are much, much more formal, like finance and banking tends to be like quite formal still. And there are other ones that are really formal. It's not bad, so to say, but I feel that there's a lot more unhealthy politics or non-useful politics that come into play in that kind of space. I also think that there's like a lot more struggle for like the best idea to come up because usually it's like dominated by power and who has the most power and influence. So formal communication style is too many boundaries where casual is too few. And that's why I think conversational is the best place to go. So conversational feels a lot like casual, except we're being really intentional with how we're communicating. And again, just put yourself in your circle of friends or put yourself with your family. There's not a lot of like intentionality with how we are with our friends and our family. Maybe more so with our kids, but like outside of that, like just with our friends and family, it's just like we're just kind of hanging out, acting however we act. If we think of conversational, it can have that warmth, but there's just the intentionality. So casual, it's too few boundaries. Formal, too many boundaries. Conversational, there's the appropriate amount of boundaries. I think there's 3 positions in there. There's center conversational, where you're very intentional and you're also like really focused on getting work done. Then there's conversational, leaning casual. This is where I put work friends. It's like totally conversational, but it has a little bit more of that warmth and that ease of like a friendship. And there's conversational leaning formal, where again, conversational is still warm, but it has more formality. And the way that I encourage you to think about it is if you're conversational leaning casual, that means there's probably like a 50-50 split of when you're spending time with someone. Probably 50% of it is just like being buddies and like kind of bullshitting, hanging out, talk about personal life. And then 50% is based on work. If you're an employer, you might be like, oh, how dare you spend 50% of your time just bullshitting? Part of the human experience, is part of the work experience, and that could be like great culture. If you are center conversational, that means 30% of your time is just like catching up, having fun, bullshitting, whatever, but 70% is focused on work. And if you're conversational leaning forward, that means 90% of your time is focused on just work stuff and 10% is more in that casual space. So what I'd encourage you with this coworker is I would be conversational leaning formal so that, you're keeping the focus of 90% of your time with this person on work stuff while still leaving a little bit of that 10% for that kind of like human warmth and that conversation. That means in this space is they may tell you about them and tell you a bit about them, but you don't tell them anything about you. You keep, if they want to get into like the conversational space around just like personal stuff or be chit-chatty, let them talk. And then as quickly as you can, move it into a workspace. I really encourage you really quickly refocus things again and again and again on work, but in like a cool, fun way. But don't really reveal a lot about yourself, about your personal life, about like, anything just like outside of work stuff. And as they're speaking, give them space. You don't need to be brisk or rude about it, but just keep redirecting them. They should, over time, catch the trend of where you're trying to move the conversation. And they should be totally used to it because most of us have very few work friends and then more people that were in the space of center conversational or conversational leaning formal. There are a couple other things that I'd suggest to you though. If in your one-to-ones that you're finding this person being super casual with you or even center conversational or conversational leaning casual, I'd encourage two things. Leave the office door or the meeting room door open. So if there's an open door and people are in a room meeting, typically people aren't going to start like, gossiping or telling you about their weekend or going on too much if the door is open. Because again, there's this psychology of like behind closed doors, we could just like chop it up and like kind of like goof off and joke around a little bit. Open door means like, well, people might be overhearing us, so we should be focused on work. The second thing I'd encourage you to do is give them the door. And what I mean by that is they should be the ones seated closest to the door rather than you. So like they would be in between you and the door. And again, what that means is like they come in, they're there, the door is open, they're closer to the door so people can hear them if they're just kind of like bullshitting around a little bit. You're a little bit further away. It has more of a come in, do your work. This is not, you're here for a good time, not a long time. Like come in, work, do your work, and then leave. Then it creates more of a space of a transaction rather than like come in, sit down, like set up base camp and chat. So keep it conversational, leaning formal. 90% of your conversation should be based on work, but leave some about 10%-ish time for the other person to share, but not you. And then leave the door open and make sure they've got the chair close to the door.